Okay, so we are talking about how to study a person's behavior, the consumer's behavior, by combining two things: a very abstract concept of utility and a very concrete concept of budget. Budget is something you actually can see, right? How much money you have, how much money is available for you to spend. But utility is something abstract. Now, the other thing is, when we talk about utility and budget, in order to make it simple, we keep it as two goods. Okay? Now, in reality, we want many different kinds of goods. But for this kind of analysis, we want to keep it as only two goods. I guess you can just think of the two goods that you like the most. Okay? So this is basically what we talked about last week. Now we're trying to combine the two, utility and budget, and try to see what can give a person the highest level of satisfaction given the limited budget. Okay, now let's take a look at this, what we call a perfect substitute. Perfect substitute means, let's say Jose, right? Jose values two goods very much: t-shirts and movies. Okay, and they, according to Jose, is almost like perfect substitutes. In other words, to give up 1 unit of movie is to gain, you know Jose is willing to give up 1 unit of movie in order to gain 1 extra unit of t-shirt. That's why the indifference curve is a straight line. Now, what do we mean by indifference curve? It means every single point on this curve generates the exact same level of satisfaction to Jose. In other words, to Jose, if you give Jose 6 movies and 1 t-shirt, the satisfaction will exactly be the same as giving Jose 4 movies and 2 t-shirts. Does it make sense? That's why it's called indifference. Indifference means it doesn't make any difference in terms of the satisfaction level. Okay, so you have got all the different combinations of t-shirts, what am I doing? Of t-shirts and movies, but as long as those combinations are on this particular straight line, to Jose, it is indifferent. Okay, so in other words, we know this is what we call a perfect substitute indifference curve. Now, so far so good. Now, please feel free to stop me, okay, if you need any clarification. Now, it is important to recognize that there's an infinite amount of indifference curve. Okay, so every straight line here means the points offer the exact same level of satisfaction. Okay, for example, if you look at IC0, every point of IC0 gives the person the exact same level of satisfaction. However, take a look at IC1. Okay, IC1 is being shifted upward, so the level of satisfaction is actually higher than that of IC0. Okay, so every point on IC1 is the same, and every point of IC1 compared to the point of IC0 is higher. Okay, in other words, B offers higher level of satisfaction than B. But A and B are the same in terms of the level of satisfaction. How about IC2? C. Now, what do you think? Do you think C offers higher or lower level of satisfaction than A and B? Yes, Pinder?
No.
Okay, higher or lower?
It may be lower.
Lower?
C is like B is offering lower than C.
Exactly. So B and A are the same, but they are lower than the level of satisfaction of C. Okay, so basically, as you can see, as long as you have one indifference curve, all the points offer the exact same level of satisfaction. But if your indifference curve is being shifted, right? If it is shifted uh, like to the right, the level increases. The level of satisfaction increases. On the other hand, if it's shifted to the left, the level of satisfaction decreases. Okay. Now I know it's a little bit difficult to read here. Okay, so instead I'm going to show you a video. Okay, that explains how the indifference curve and the budget, how they interact. Let's take a look. Yeah, it takes a while. What happened? Oh, yeah.
So so it's this indifference, we view these indifference curves, and the idea is all the same level of utility, and when you're moving to higher and higher indifference curves, you're getting higher and higher utility. So consumers would want to move to the highest indifference curve they can possibly go to. So for example, from this diagram here, IC1, IC2, IC3, consumers will always try to move to go to bundles which are on IC3, right? But remember, this is only one side of the problem. Obviously, you want to achieve IC3, but here or a constraint to this will be your affordability, because you cannot, you might want to, have, let's say Tom might want to buy 10 movies and 10 t-shirts which are on IC3, but maybe it's outside its budget line, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually bring the budget line in this diagram, and then both of them to give us the perfect solution to this problem. And I'll show you there's only one feasible solution. Okay, it won't be, there's going to be one specific answer, and that's the perfect choice for Tom to maximize his utility. So let's make the indifference. Let's build. Let's bring the budget line in. So remember the budget line, right? We took into account prices and income. What does it mean, right? It means that any point, any bundle outside the budget line are not feasible for Tom. Tom cannot go there, right? So automatically that means, okay, Tom would want to be here, want to be on the high. Similarly, all these indifference curves, remember, he could have a series of indifference curves. None of them are feasible. They're all outside his budget line. So that means we need to focus on indifference curves like, these blue ones. So there could also be ones below here, right? Like there could be also an indifference curve like this one here. So, these are all affordable to him. But remember, if you give Tom these three options, let's say, okay, let's assume this one, he will never prefer this. He will always want to be on this. So Tom's choices will be limited to these indifference curves here. But which one will he go to, right? So what I'm going to show you is ultimately Tom will always prefer, or he will always end up at this bundle B or this IC1. Why is that? So suppose, let's take this this indifference curve first. Okay, this indifference curve, this blue one here, and you can see that this indifference curve cuts the budget line at 2 points. It cuts it at bundle A, and it cuts it at, let's say, at bundle X. Okay, so it cuts it at 2 points. So that means what? That means this bundle A is also, these bundles are affordable for Tom. So, level, and obviously they're affordable because they lie on his budget line. And remember, he wants to be on his budget line because he ends up spending all his money. But here's the thing, right? So, but so this bundle A, which is on its budget line, but there can also be an indifference curve. Let's say, there can also be an indifference curve from about utility of 30. There could be indifference curve which gives him utility of 40, which lies slightly above it, which also cuts the budget line at a couple of points. So what does that mean? That which is also affordable. So why is it affordable? Because it lies on the budget line. P is better than A because P lies on a higher indifference curve. So this one goes out in indifference curve here, which gives you a point, but oops, sorry, which is all curve than P. So this gives him higher utility. So that means this also drops space here. You'll be on the budget line, but he can still, but there can still be indifference curves on top of it, which gives him more utility. So it turns out that the indifference curve, which is at the end of this frontier, is this special blue one, which gives him this bundle B. So after this, any indifference curve where he's going to go to will give him bundles which are over the budget line. So he can't go there. And any indifference curve which are below it will be, so what it will turn out is this indifference curve is going to be the special indifference curve for him. Now notice what is the unique quality of this indifference curve. This indifference curve must by definition touch the budget line at only one point, because any other indifference curve you take, it's going to cut the budget line at 2 points, but that leaves some area for improvement. There at least some area to achieve where there's going to be another indifference curve. It's only when you get to the special indifference curve which touch, this is the best you can do. Anything above it is unaffordable. Anything below it leaves you some room for improvement. So this is the special indifference curve which is going to Tom is going to go to. Now the other great thing about this indifference curve is because it touches the budget line at that single point, it gives you that special solution, right? So that means, remember, we wanted to find that special bundle. We wanted to come to one answer, and here is that answer for you. So Tom is going to pick this specific bundle B. Now, because this, so the technical name for this solution is the solution of B happens where the indifference curve and the budget line are tangent. So tangency means, it's like a geometric concept when you have two objects which touch each other at just a single point. And it turns out it's at this indifference curve, which is tangent to the budget line, that Tom will find the solution to his utility maximization problem. Because any other indifference curve you take, any other on top is unaffordable. Any other on bottom is cutting the budget line at 2 points. They're not tangent, but that means there is some room for improvement. There is still some room for him to go to higher indifference curves. It's when he goes to this one, which is the tangent indifference curve, that that means after that there is no point for there's no room for improvement. That is why this is the solution. So this is the solution to the consumer problem, to the utility maximization problem. And or you can say this is the consumer equilibrium solution, because once he goes there, he cannot move from there. If he moves below, he becomes worse off. Anything above, he cannot go. So that is why, so these two things mean the same: utility maximization problem, consumer equilibrium. And this is how you find the solve, right? So this is basically what I showed you here. Is we have the indifference curves which plots preferences. We put them together, and when we find this special indifference curve which is tangent to the budget line, we find our solution to the utility maximization problem. Okay, utility maximization problem using a diagram, the budget line and the indifference curve in one single diagram. And in the next video, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about something known as the income and supply. Okay, let's say this diagram has given us the solution. Now, what is going to happen if there's a price change? How will the consumer change his behavior? And then we're going to get able to tie them to some things we learned in chapter 3, which is the demand theory chapter. Okay.
I just want to clarify with you a few things. Number one, as you can see here, the indifference curve is no longer a straight line. Remember, we just talked about a few minutes ago. If it's a perfect substitute, right, then the indifference curve will be a straight line. But mostly, the indifference curves are like this, okay, mostly. So that's why you see that these indifference curves are not straight lines, okay? Number two, basically the best possible choice for a consumer is that given the limited budget, that he or she can enjoy the highest level of utility, or we call it the highest level of satisfaction, right? Which is the point that the budget touches the indifference curve. Okay, anything higher than that is not feasible to the consumer. But anything lower than that, for example, this indifference curve, means there's still room for the consumer to get higher level of satisfaction. So that's why this is called the best possible point. Okay? You cannot find any other point that either is under the person's budget or at the same time with the higher level of utility than this point. So this is the best possible option for the consumer. Any question? Okay,
No.
good. So now let's take a look of how the change of the price, okay, how the change, sorry, let me go back. Oh, how the price change of income and substitution may change the person's option. Now, before we watch the video, I guess you can use a little bit of imagination. If the person's income has increased, how do you think it will affect the budget line?
The budget line will increase and their consumption will also increase.
Yeah, in other
Like
words,
of,
very
yes.
good. In other words, the budget line will be shifted upward, right? Because now the person has more money to spend. Okay, so you can imagine, right? When the budget line is being shifted upward, that means it will be able to hit a higher level utility graph, utility curve, right? So this is basically what it is about. Now let's take a look at how exactly it works.
So hi everyone again. This is and in this video we're going to explore with the indifference curve and the budget line to see, let's say in their buying decisions if there's a change in price. And when we do that, we're going to see how when we were doing demand theory. Okay, so just a quick recap again. So we saw, in the last video we sort of derived the solution to the consumer choice problem, right? We said that the way you can find this is by urgency between the indifference curve and the budget line. So in this diagram, this okay, now we're going to study something which is known as the income and substitution effects. So like I said, we're going to see how we react as a consumer, how we react based if there's a change in the price. So I just already showed this to you, right? So the point of tangency gives us the solution to this consumer choice problem, namely given a specific income and some prices today. This is and if this person like Tom has to choose his utility maximizing choice, okay? Okay, now let's say, so I say here, okay, suppose now we have found this solution for Tom, and then in the market, there are people who are identical to Tom. So let's say there are 100 identical buyers to Tom, right? So what you can do is, if one person is, let's say if one person like Tom is buying 4 movies and a total of 400 movies are being consumed and a total of 200 t-shirts. Okay, I'm just multiplying it by just making this assumption that there's 100 identical consumers like Tom. Okay, now let's say the price of t-shirt goes up in the market. Whatever we did this, it seems like a while back. We said that when there's a price change, what happens is the budget line is going to it's going to shift, right? So do you guys remember? I don't know if I maybe I can quickly show this to you, maybe in a whiteboard. So when we were doing this budget line, let's say we said, okay, the income of Tom is $40. The price of movies, if I remember, it was $5 and the price of t-shirt was $10, right? So you had movies here, you had t-shirts here, and I think we drew the budget line, which was like this. So this was, so you can either buy 4 movies if you spend all your money for buying movies, sorry, 8 movies, or you can buy 4 t-shirts. So what is going to happen if the price of t-shirt doubles? So if the price of t-shirt from $10, let's say it becomes $20. So how many t-shirts can you buy now? So you can only buy 40 divided by 20. If you spend all your money buying t-shirts, you can only buy 2 t-shirts. So what is going to happen? This point is now going to shift. So the budget line is going to move inwards, right? So this is the, basically this is the impact of a change in price to the budget line. You had an indifference curve like this, right? Like the people were, this was the utility maximizing choice of a consumer. This indifference curve no longer becomes viable. You cannot stay on that indifference curve because that's too expensive. There's going to be another indifference curve, which is going to be lower to that. So because of this price range, there's going to be impact on your utility. You will be able to, and that is difference curve, because this indifference curve is no longer affordable. Okay, so you're going to change their bundle point B, where there's a new combination of movies and t-shirts you're consuming. So let me go back to my slides. Okay, so what has happened is in this slide, so initially, let's say consumers were at point A, the price of t-shirt went up, the budget line, as you can see, it pivoted or shifted inside, and then now there's a new consumption bundle which people are choosing, right? Sorry. So the budget line shifted inwards. This was your original choice. Now this is the new bundle. So it can be one consumers or everyone together. It doesn't matter because we're assuming all consumers are identical. Now notice what has happened in this new bundle. So previously in the market, people were buying 400 movies and 200 t-shirts, right? So after the price range, everyone, people have changed their behavior because t-shirts have become more expensive, and they have now ended up here. So you can see that in this point, you have this new solution C, where movies have actually gone up and t-shirts have actually decreased. So why is that happen? So C. So the reason is, think about it, when the price of a good goes up, what we say is there's actually 2 impacts on the behavior of consumers. Number one, the good which becomes more expensive, it becomes less appealing to you. You don't want to buy that. Now, at the same time, then the other good, its relative price is becoming lower, right? So previously, remember, let's say the price of movies was $5, the price of t-shirt was 10. So a movie was, a t-shirt was 2 times as expensive. Now, when the price of the t-shirt doubles, the price of the t-shirt becomes 4 times more expensive. So number one, you become, less attracted to t-shirts, but you could also become more attracted to movies because, compared to t-shirts now, movie is much cheaper. So there's this basically one thing. So one good is becoming, less attractive, and the other good relatively. So when you compare it to the t-shirt, it's becoming more attractive. Okay, so that is one reason why your behavior gets impacted. The other reason is whenever something becomes more expensive, your purchasing power goes down, right? So let's say just when t-shirts are becoming expensive, actually your buying power is getting impacted overall. So you might also think, t-shirts are more expensive. I need to spend more money there. Hey, maybe I need to also adjust my buying, purchase of movies. So when something becomes expensive, these are the 2 impacts which happen on a consumer. So this 1 + 2, this gives you the total impact, right? Okay, so impact. So we want to say, okay, what is the exact change in behavior just because of effect 1 becoming more appealing of effect 1, and then can isolate them, and then we want to add them to get an idea of that. We have devised 2 terms for these 2 effects. So we say that the first effect, we call it the substitution effect, will capture when one thing becomes more expensive and you away to the other good. So t-shirts have become more expensive, movies might become more appealing to you, so you might have a habit of substituting away. Okay, so this is known, so the substitution effect is going to capture the first point I was talking about. The income effect is going to capture the second point, which is when, it's like, you walk into a grocery store today, suddenly, let's say you find that eggs have become more expensive. That actually impacts your overall buying power, because you might say to yourself that, I really need to buy eggs. let me today not grab something else. Let me today, I was today also planning to buy a box of cereal, but I'm not going to buy that because I need to spend more money for eggs. So basically a price change impacts your overall purchasing ability. And that is captured in the income effect. Okay, so we have the substitution effect, which is going to capture the change in your behavior just because of the one good has become more appealing, the other has become less appealing. Or I should say one good has become less appealing because its price has income effect is going to capture because of a price change, your overall purchasing power goes down. How does it affect your behavior? So we're going to do an exercise and we're going to try to exercise. Okay, so I'll start with.
I'm just wondering, okay, before we move on to the discussion of the two effects, does anyone want to take a break? Or are you okay to just keep going?
Okay to keep going.
Okay, sure.
Perfect. So what we do is, so let's assume, let me just draw that same diagram. So you had t-shirts here, you had movies here. Let's say this was your old indifference curve, an old budget line. People were consuming, I think I'm just going to make it, sorry. Yeah, let's say people were consuming a point like A. The price went up, the budget line shifted inwards, and then people have moved to point C. Okay. Okay, now the way, what you do is to isolate this income effect and the substitution effect. You ask yourself this hypothetical question. So you say, okay, how would people change their behavior if I could keep utility constant to the earlier level? So remember, this indifference curve gives you some level of utility, right? Let's say utility of 50. When you're going to move to this indifference curve, you're going to get some lower utility. Let's say utility of 30. Now you're going to say, okay, suppose the price of, like I said, the price of t-shirts have changed. How would people change their behavior if I could keep them on this same utility curve? How would they change their behavior then? So what you do is, so this new budget line which you have drawn, okay, you're going to draw a hypothetical budget line which has the same slope as this one, but it is tangent to your old indifference curve. So what you're going to do is you're going to draw this which has the same slope. Okay, so I tried to draw this with as the same slope as here, but I drew it in such a way that it touches my original indifference curve. Okay, so you see what I did here? I drew this new curve. And then I tried to find this point here, B. So I have a better diagram here, okay? So, which is from the textbook. So this was your old budget line. This is your new one. I'm going to try to shift this till it becomes tangent to the old indifference curve. So this gives me a new point, B, okay? So what is this B? So this B is hypothetically, how would people have changed their behavior if you told them, if you said, stay on the same indifference curve, or let's keep your utility the same, but at the new price of t-shirts, what would be the new amount of t-shirts you will buy? Okay. So what is this B showing you? So this movement from A to B, okay, this movement from A to B, this is known as the substitution effect. Now notice what happens at B. So at A, you were consuming 200 t-shirts and 400 movies. At B, let's say you're consuming what? Let's say you're consuming 110 t-shirts and maybe 650 movies. So this says the pure price effect, the effect of t-shirts becoming less appealing has made movies more appealing to you. So if I could have held your utility constant to your old level, what you would have done is you would have increased your consumption of movies to 650 and you would have reduced your consumption of t-shirts to 110. So this is the impact of t-shirts becoming, your utility has stayed the same. Your utility has stayed at your old level. The way you do it is you basically are saying that, okay, I'm going to try to give the consumer some money so you can stay on your old indifference curve, but t-shirts are too expensive, man. I'm only going to buy 110 t-shirts, but wow, movies look cheaper to me now, and I'm going to increase my consumption of movies from 400 to 650. This is called the substitution effect. Okay. Now the income effect is, so we have identified, let's say A was your old bundle, A to B, which is the, this hypothetical bundle, which you found by drawing this, new budget line, right? This budget line with the same slope as this solid one here. This A to B, we said, is our substitution effect, which shows that just because of the price change, how people would have reduced movies and increased their, how people would have reduced the t-shirts and increased their movies. Okay, now this movement from B to C, so C was your, remember C was your final bundle. This movement from C to B to C is then called the income effect. So notice what this income, so notice how your consumption is changing from B to C. So you would have said, I would have moved from A to B. I would have reduced t-shirts and increased movies just because of the price change. But because the price change is impacting my overall purchasing power, I will move from B to C, which is I'm going to decrease. So this basically, because of the price increase, your overall purchasing power has been impacted. What does this lead to you to do? This leads you to decrease your consumption of both goods, right? So basically what do you do? So notice from B to C, your movie falls, and your t-shirt falls even more. So this movement from B to C isolates the income effect, which is how you're changing your behavior just because your purchasing power is going down. And because your purchasing power overall is going down, the income effect is showing you that you're decreasing your consumption of both movies and both t-shirts. So now you have these two effects. And to get the final effect, you have to sum them. So look what has happened. So remember, the final effect is actually A to C. The substitution effect, you had t-shirts falling, but movie rising, A to B. With the income effect, both are falling. So in terms of t-shirt, the substitution effect says t-shirt will fall. The income effect says also t-shirt will fall. So that's why you had when you were comparing A to C, you will see that your t-shirts overall are going down. Why? Because both the substitution effect is negative. The substitution effect is decreasing it. The income effect is decreasing it as well. In terms of movies, the substitution effect increased it, right? In terms of movies, the substitution effect increased it, but the income effect decreased it. But it turns out the substitution effect increased it by this amount, right? It increased it from 400 to 650. The income effect decreased it a bit, but overall movies are going up because the substitution effect, which is the way you would substitute to movies because t-shirts became more expensive, that is larger than the income effect, which is the way you reduce movies because your purchasing power has gone down. So because the substitution effect is greater, it turns out that movie consumption actually increases. Isolate the impact of a price change. I know it's a bit, as economists, the reason we're doing it is because we are saying when there's a price change, there's two impacts on people's behavior: the price effect or the substitution effect, and the income effect. And we want to see, how these things, what is the impact of these two effects, right? And then by combining them, we try to deduce the final effect. Now, notice that when you do this income and substitution effect, and when you did this overall exercise, it actually gave us a few things. It actually gave us a few results, which we also covered in chapter 3. So I'm just going to talk about that and then end this discussion. Number one, overall, what do you see? In terms of t-shirt, where the price of t-shirts went up, what happened to your consumption of t-shirts? You moved from A to C. So the final effect was consumption of t-shirt went down. So price of t-shirts went up, consumption of t-shirts went down. So this is what? Well, this is something which we learned in demand theory, right? Which is an increasing price reduces quantity demanded. So you can see that the result from this consumer theory model is consistent with the result from the demand theory model, right? So price went up, consumption of t-shirt went down. Now in the demand theory, when we're studying demand theory, remember we also studied something known as normal goods. Do you remember we also studied how is demand impacted by change in income? So over there we studied there can be two, it depends on the type of good. If you have a normal good, what was a normal good? A normal good was when your income goes up, your demand goes up. Or vice versa, when your income goes down, demand goes down. Now, if you go back here, think about the income effect. What was the income effect? The income effect was the movement from B to C, right? Maybe I can do it here. The income effect was the movement from B to C. Now, when the income effect happened, what happened to your consumption? Well, because of your purchasing power went down, you reduced movies, you also reduced t-shirts, right? The movement from B to C. So what does that mean? Your income went down, your demand of both goods went down. So now you can actually also look at the income effect to comment if the goods are normal. Yes, the goods are normal because a reduction in your purchasing power led to a fall in the consumption of both goods. So the consumer behavior model can also be used to deduce if the goods in question are normal or inferior. So it turns out, because in this specific example, people were reducing their demand of both movies and t-shirts, when their purchasing power fell, they both must be normal goods. You can get also other cases where you might see that, you might also get an odd case where sometimes you might see the income effect of one good is positive. So your income went down, but your consumption of one good due to the income effect went up. Then that good would become an inferior good. Okay. So you can also use this model to determine whether the goods are normal or inferior. Finally, you can also use this model to determine whether the two goods in questions are complements or substitutes. So do you remember substitutes and complements? Again, we covered in chapter 3. So substitute goods are goods where, if the price of movie went up, if the goods are substitute, if the price of t-shirt went up, that means the consumption, if the goods are substitute, the consumption of movies would go up, right? So that would mean goods are substitutes. Like we use the example, more common examples of tea and coffee. If the price of tea goes up, the consumption of coffee goes up. Notice that is also something we can determine from here. When we did the final change from A to C, what happened? Well, the price, right, from A to C, you can see that in the final analysis, people are actually consuming more movies. So you can also use that to make a comment on whether the goods are complements and substitutes. The price of movies, the price of t-shirt went up, the consumption of movies went up in the final analysis. So that means that these two goods are substitutes. If you would have found the opposite, let's say after doing the whole analysis, if it turned out that the price of movies went up, but overall, actually consumers are also reducing, the price of t-shirts went up, but overall the consumers are also reducing their demand for movies, that would have made the goods complements. So, I just wanted to give you a summary that this model is very rich, and it comes up with all these results, which can, which also are connected to what we learned under the demand theory class. So they're not isolated models, right? Obviously they have to go hand in hand, because the demand model also looked at consumer choices, and this consumer theory model, it also looks at consumer choices. So basically that is how so these are basically, I would say, some of the things you learn from consumer theory about demand theory. Okay, the consumer theory will also tell you what happens to the demand of some of the goods are normal or inferior when you look at the income effect, and by looking at the overall change, you can also determine if the two goods in question are complements or substitutes. So guys, that's it. I know this was a bit of a tricky talk. If needed, try to look at this video again. This is probably one of the trickiest concepts on consumer behavior. Try to look at, if it's not clear the first view, try to give it another go. And then there's also the textbook, right? The textbook will also help you if you read that. Okay, guys. So that's the end of Unit 5. And yeah, so, good luck studying it. Thank you.
So I'm thinking of giving you a break, but before that, I wonder if there's any question. I know what has been covered, the interaction, right? The dynamic may sound a little bit complicated. So I just want to see if anyone needs any clarification. No?
No.
Okay, good. So you want to take a break? We can. Now it's 9:52. Why don't we resume the class at 10 o'clock?
Yeah, sure. Professor, can you tell me when the meeting will end?
That's a good question. I think I will try to end maybe before 11:30, or yeah, something like that. Do you have somewhere to go to? I mean, work or something?
Yeah.
So what time do you have to leave?
At 11.
Okay. Well, sure. I'll try to end at 11. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So let's resume the class at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Now, before we move on to Unit 6, I want to explain to you why the indifference curve in general is a curve rather than a straight line. Because usually, okay, more someone consumes something, the less satisfaction the person feels. Okay, in many cases. Okay, so usually rather than having a lot of something and a little of another thing, generally speaking, people tend to have a more balanced combination. Because of that, the curve usually looks like this rather than a straight line. And there's a name for this situation, or there's a way to describe this phenomenon. We call it diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So basically, it means the more you have something, the more you have less satisfaction. Okay? Yeah. Any question about that?
Yeah, can you explain one more time?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you explain that one more time?
Okay. For example, you have, let's say your two most preferred food are fish and, I don't know, cookies. Okay. Let's say those are the two most preferred goods of you. Okay. Now, generally speaking, to a lot of people, they would rather have some fish and some cookies rather than having like 10 fish and one cookie, or 10 cookies and one fish. Okay, so
Okay.
this is basically called the diminishing marginal rate of substitution, meaning that usually rather than people kind of want to have a combination of the two in a more balanced way. Because supposedly the more fish you have, the additional fish you get gives you a lower satisfaction compared to the previous fish. Okay? Because of that, it's not likely that someone would want 10 fish and one cookie, or 10 cookies and one fish. They usually want something in between. Okay? So that's why your curve looks like this.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
any question? Now, you know what? Because we are not seeing each other face to face, and I guess when we meet, not next Tuesday, right? But the week after, we can do a little bit more exercises, or
Okay.
you can ask me any more questions, right? But in the meantime, that's basically what we have discussed for Unit 5. And if there's no more question, I think we can move on to Unit 6. But then, as I said, when we meet each other again face to face, we can go back to Unit 5 in case if there's anything that need to be clarified.
Okay.
Very good. How about just Karen, Priyanshu, and so on?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So now, should we move to Unit 6 then? Now, if you remember, Unit 5 is basically about consumers' behavior, right? So, can anyone tell me, consumers' behavior, is it about the demand or the supply? Consumers' behavior, is it about the demand or supply? When we talk about consumers in general, consumers, demand, more about the demand or supply? No,
I
no.
think demand.
Yeah, exactly, right? Consumers are the one who buy the goods and services. So we're talking about the demand side, right? And as said, demand is not only someone's willingness to get something, but it's also about the person's ability or the affordability, right, to get something. Okay, so that's why when we study the consumer's behavior, we need to put into consideration of not only the person's utility, but also the budget. But in other words, we're not talking only about whether the person is willing to get something, but it's also about, in reality, if he or she has the ability or money to get those things. Make sense? Now let's talk about the next unit, which actually has to do with the supply side. The supply side. Okay? Now, when we talk about the supply side, it's about the producers. The producers, okay? The producers are the one who produce the goods and services and sell them to the consumers. Now, let's take a look. From the consumer's perspective, you know, they care about the satisfaction and the budget, right? Now think about this. From the producer's perspective, what do you think they care the most?
Supply.
Sorry?
Their supply.
The supply, I know, but at the end of the day, what they want to see happening when they sell the goods and
Profit.
profit, exactly, right? So basically, the producer's behavior is profit driven. Okay, so they care about two major things: revenue and cost, right? Because basically, this is what determines the profit. The ideal situation is to have a lot of revenue and only very little cost, right? So because of that, the whole idea of producer theory is about maximization of profit. Maximization of profit. Now, if we take a look of this, okay. Now, first of all, when we talk about profit, okay, please understand that economists look at profit differently from a lot of people. When we talk about profit, generally speaking, we say, oh, total revenue minus total cost, right? But economists, when they look at cost, they don't look at what we call the explicit cost, but they also look at the implicit cost, right? Which is something we talked about previously. In other words, the opportunity cost that may not involve money, right? But it's still a cost that the economists will consider. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now let's take a look of the explicit versus implicit costs. For example, you need $100,000 to start your business. The interest rate is 5%. Okay, so case one, you borrow $100,000. Okay, so the explicit cost is 100,000 times 5% equals 5,000. Make sense? That's the interest cost. Okay, However, okay, if you use $40,000 of your savings and borrow $6,000, I mean $60,000, right? Then you only need to pay $3,000 as the interest on loan. Okay. Now, if you just compare the explicit cost, right? It looks like, oh, you know what? It's a much better idea for me to use my own savings and to borrow, you know, the rest of the money from the bank, right? Because I only need to pay $3,000 on loan compared to $5,000. But economists say, wait a second, right? That is not it. Because if you don't use that $40,000 of your savings for your business, you can use the $40,000 for something else. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You can actually lend the $40,000 to someone else and earn the 5% interest. So because of that, even though if you compare the explicit cost, it seems that it's a much better deal if you use $40,000 of your savings and only borrow $60,000. Economists say, wait a second, don't forget your $40,000 has the implicit cost of 5% because you can lend this $40,000 to someone else and earn 5%. But now because you have decided to use that $40,000 for your business, turn out your foregone interest you could have earned on your $40,000 is gone. So supposingly, if you can lend $40,000 to someone with 5%, okay, then your opportunity cost here is 2,000. Turn out you don't really gain anything if you put that into consideration. So in other words, the two options are indifferent. Okay, now obviously there are different assumptions here, right? The first assumption, you can lend your $40,000 to someone else with 5% interest charged, right? That is the major assumption. Okay,
Yeah.
and yeah, so but I guess the concept is that you don't look at the explicit cost, that is the money that you need to pay to someone, but you also need to look at what you have forgone, what you have sacrificed. Okay, so economists say when you think about cost, you need to consider both. Okay, in both cases, the costs are 5,000, so it doesn't make a difference. Now that's why we also have a different concept regarding profit. From the accounting perspective, accountants, they don't calculate opportunity cost. They only look at how much revenue you get, what are your expenses, costs. The difference is the profit. We call that accounting profit. On the other hand, the economists, they have a different perspective. They say, no, when you calculate the profit, you have to subtract not only the explicit cost, but also the implicit cost. We call that the economic profit. Okay, as you can see, the economic profit is always smaller than the accounting profit because the economists take into consideration of the implicit cost, which is the opportunity cost being sacrificed. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you? Okay. Now let's take a look at this example. Okay, you have got two columns, okay, to compare between accounting and economic profit. Sorry. Yeah, okay. For the first column, okay, okay, we're trying to calculate the economic profit. Yeah, wait a sec. I think it's a little bit confusing here. Oh, sorry. Let me repeat myself. Okay, let me correct myself. Sorry, the two columns. Okay, the first column. Okay, as you can see, summarizes the explicit costs. Okay, summarizes the explicit costs, and also here the implicit costs. So the second column is only to show you the calculation, the result of the calculation. Okay, I know the table looks a little bit confusing. So basically, you know, this is to show you that the accounting profit by subtracting the explicit cost from the total revenue is $840, right? 2,000 minus 1,160 is $840. And then after you have put into consideration of the implicit cost, which is another $265, your economic profit is only $575. Now let's take a look at what are the explicit costs. Now they are very straightforward, right? Easy to understand. Wages and salaries, intermediate inputs, rent, interest on loan, depreciation. Okay, when you add them up, those then you get the explicit costs, right? And the difference is the accounting profit. Now then let's take a look at the opportunity costs. Now what do we mean by opportunity cost of owner's time? What do you think it means? Opportunity cost of owner's time. Anyone? Make a guess.
The time that he is sacrificing for this?
Yes, and in fact, the time that he or she sacrifice can be used to do something else. For example, he or she can go to work for some other person and earn a salary. Make sense? Now remember, whenever you're talking about opportunity cost, you're only talking about the second best option. Now, obviously, that owner, right, can go to a party, can go to work for employer A, can go to work for employer B, can you know, go to study. But here we are assuming what is the second most valuable option for the owner. Let's say the second most valuable option for the owner is to go to work for employer A, and employer A is willing to give $160 to this owner, right? So that is considered to be the opportunity cost of the owner's time. Make sense?
Yeah.
How about the opportunity cost of the owner's 1,500 capital? The owner can lend, for example, instead of using the $1,500 for the business, can actually put it into a bank, right? Or to purchase some kind of investment, right? That basically can generate some income. But instead, the owner has chosen to use this $1,500 for the business. That's why the owner has given up the opportunity to earn this, you know, risk-free return and risk premium. That's why, it's another, $105 being involved. So turn out the total implicit cost is $265, and the economic profit is the difference, okay, and it's 575. And you see that 575 is less than 840. Okay. Now there's another concept which is very, very important. Now on a daily life situation, right? You probably have heard about people talking about short run, long run, right? Oh, in the long run, I'm going to do something, right? In the short run, okay, I'm going to do that, okay? But you know what? When we talk about long run and short run in the context of economics, there's actually a very well-defined meaning of it, okay? So short run and long run in the context of economics is not about the time frame. It's not about like, if it is 1 month, then we call it short run. If it is 2 months and above, we call it long run. No, it's not like this. So listen to this very carefully. When economists talk about short run, okay, it's a time period in which the quantity of inputs called the fixed factors cannot be changed. There is at least one input that cannot be changed. In other words, when you are thinking about like setting up a factory, right, to produce t-shirts, okay, in the long run means there are some factors that you cannot be changed. For example, you cannot expand the capacity of your factory, okay? So there are certain limitations for you to change those factors. That is what we mean by short run, okay? Fixed factor or input which is fixed cannot be changed in a short period, such as capital, land, services of management, or even the supply of skilled labor. Then you have variable factors, right? The variable factors is not fixed and can be changed even in the long run, such as wages, raw materials, okay? So this is the concept of short run. For example, you cannot easily increase the capacity of your factory. But in the long run, even the fixed factors can be changed. Think about this. If you want to increase the capacity of your factory, you can actually build a new factory, right? Or you can buy some new machines to replace the old ones. So in the long run, the factors, even the fixed factors, can be changed. And that is what we mean by long run. So short run and long run is not determined by the length of the time period, but it's determined by whether those fixed factors can be changed. Make sense?
Yeah.
So now let's take a look of the total products of labor. Now the total amount produced during a given period of time is called the total products of labor. For example, you can imagine, right? I'm pretty sure some of you are now working on a part-time basis. When you go to work, every minute, every hour, you are producing something for your company. That's why they hire you, right? Maybe you're serving your customers. Maybe if you are working in a factory, you're producing something. It doesn't matter. But basically, is how many products you have produced, okay, or how many products you and your colleagues have produced. Now, even though we talk about total products of labor, right, in reality, we are also including services. It's just that when these kind of concepts came out, it was the time that people mostly work in the factories, right? Because these concepts have come out for a long time. So we are still talking about the Industrial Revolution, right? People working in factory, that kind of context. So, but it's still applicable to services. So marginal product of labor, the change in output that results from employing an extra unit of labor. For example, if you hire one extra labor, what is the additional input that this additional labor can produce? Okay, so in other words, the marginal product of the labor is the change of the total product caused by the change of this additional labor. Okay, in other words, the marginal product MP of labor is given by this. Okay, so let me show you the example here. Suppose a barber shop productions in a short run. Now, because when we talk about short run, we assume that the barber cannot easily change the size of the store, right? Cannot change the machines. However, the barber shop can change the number of people working there. This is the factor that can be changed in a short run, okay? Because the number of barbers is not fixed. It's not fixed factor. Calculate TP, MP, and AP if there's one shop, one fixed factor, and the number of labor per barber increased from 1 to 6. Now, think about this. If the store has one barber, the total product is 15, the marginal product is 15, and the average product is obviously 15 because you only have one, right? One barber. If you have two barbers, okay, then the total product is 37. Why? Because the first barber has produced, 15. But the second barber, according to what we see here, has produced 22. 22. Okay, the marginal product of the second barber is 22. So that's why the total product is 37. So the average product is the average between 15 and 37, which is 18.5. Now then you get a third barber. The third barber is actually very effective. The third barber's marginal product is 25. So your total product is 37 plus 25, which is 62. And then the average is, 62 divided by 3, which is 20.6. Okay, so you just keep adding the barbers up to 6. Okay, the maximum. Now, because of that, you get you get 3 different values: the total product, the marginal product, as well as the average product. Okay. Now, the marginal product of labor, the marginal analysis to determine whether increasing our inputs will be profitable. In other words, before you add one extra barber, you need to consider what is the marginal benefit I can get from this extra barber. So far, so good? So far, so good? I want to make sure that you understand what I've just said before I move forward, because when we talk about economics, sometimes it's like building a castle, right? If the foundation is not solid, then it's hard for you to keep going up. So far, so good?
Yes.
Good. Now, but if we take a look of what we are, like what our example has illustrated, when the shop first increased the number of barbers, okay, the marginal product of the additional barber rises. But interestingly, up to a point, the marginal product from the additional barber starts to fall. Now, can anyone guess why? Can anyone guess why? Isn't that supposed to be the more the people to work, the better? But how come if you keep increasing the number of barbers, the marginal product, that means the contribution of the new barber, the additional barber, actually drops? Anyone? Use a little bit of imagination, or even use your workplace as an example, right? Think about if you are working at A&W or McDonald's or Starbucks, right? If you have only one person taking care of the whole store, what do you think? Any comment? If you have only one person taking care of the whole store, what do you think? No problem? Hey, are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you have only one person taking care of the whole, say, Starbucks or McDonald's or A&W, doesn't matter, right? To take up the whole store, actually that person is super busy, right? And the productivity may not be that good because that person has to do too many things at the same time.
Yes.
If you add one additional employee to help him or to help her, that new employee actually has contributed a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because with that new person, all of a sudden things can be done in a much effective way. Oh, you go and take the order. I go and make the coffee. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, then you add the third employee. Yes, probably also very good. Now you can have one employee taking order, one employee taking the money, and then the third person making the coffee. However, if you keep adding employees up to a point, let's say you have added 6 employees, do you think those additional employees can help a lot? Not exactly.
Yes.
Why? Not really, because think about this. If you have a Starbucks store, right? Then you have one person taking the order, one person getting the money, one person making the coffee, maybe another person, the fourth one, doing the food. Okay, that's good. But then if you keep adding, right, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, all of a sudden, the more people you have, the additional one has become less important.
Yeah.
Even worse, think about you have a Starbucks store with limited space, right? If you have like, I don't know, 10 people working, right? Not
Yeah.
only that they cannot help, but they would actually make the whole workplace too crowded. And turn out it is not a very productive move. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So because of that, if you look at the graph here, the more people you get, right? At first, the marginal productivity of the additional staff actually has increased. But up to a point, if you keep adding employee, the new employee actually contributed less and less and less. So going back to this example, talking about the barbers, the reason is the single barber needs to do everything. Say hello to people, answer the phone, cut hair, clean up, and run the cash register. The second barber reduces the level of disruption and distribute works, which increase marginal returns. However, as barbers are added, the advantage of each additional barber is less. The additional of a 6th or 7th or 8th barber just to greet people at the door will have very little impact, okay, than the second one did. So this is why the marginal product of labor, after a certain point starts to decrease. Now then you may argue, hey, but you know what, Wallace, how about this? We can increase the space of the barber shop, or we can increase the space of the Starbucks. Then I can accommodate more people to work. Now, what do you think? What do you think? Now, let's not forget, we are talking about short run here, okay? So our assumption is that you cannot change the size of the shop,
Yeah.
okay? That's why this whole concept we are talking about here right now is about in the short run. If you keep adding more people to work, the marginal product of labor will increase at the beginning, but then decrease after a certain point. So far, so good?
Yeah.
How about you, Brinter and just Karen? Makes sense, right? Okay, good. Now, this is what we call the law of diminishing marginal returns. If increasing amounts of variable factor are applied to a given quantity of a fixed factor, holding the level of technology constant, eventually a situation will be reached. Then after that, the marginal product of the variable factor declines, okay? In our barber example, to increase output in the short run, more and more of a variable factor barber is combined with a given amount of the fixed factor, the shop. We assume that the shop cannot be expanded. Each successive unit of the variable factor has less and less of the fixed factor to work with. And eventually, equal increases in work effort begin to add less and less to total output. Any question?
No.
Now let's take a look at the relationship between the marginal productivity, okay, and the average productivity of labor. L in this case means labor. When your marginal product is larger than the average product, okay, if you look at the graph here, if your marginal product is larger than the average product, the AP, the average product, is increasing. Because whenever you add one more additional barber, the average would be risen, right? Because that additional barber contributes more than the previous barber, okay? So when MP is larger than AP is increasing, and MP curve lies above the AP curve. Up to a point now, when the marginal product is less than the average product, then the AP is decreasing, right? You can imagine if the new person who comes in offers less than the previous person, then it will lower your overall average. So at this point, the MP curve lies below the average product curve. In other words, it is a time when the sorry, I think it's marginal. Yeah, when the marginal, the maximum, the maximum point. Okay, PM here means maximum point. Okay, here, okay, is when the marginal product of labor touches or is the same as the average the average labor product. Okay, that is the maximum point. Now, I just want to see if I can quickly show you another video. And because I know that some of you need to work, I won't keep you for too long. Okay, sorry, let me. But you know what? Before that, I wonder if there's any questions so far. I wonder if there's any question. Binter, Priyansu, I wonder if there's any question.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Good. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to skip some of them, okay? Yeah, because I think you should be able to understand those. Okay, I wonder if there's any question so far. Okay, you know what? So basically, I don't want to go any further. Okay, we can save it for our next class. But just want to remind you, in case that you don't remember, there, for your assignment 3, the due date has been switched to 22nd. Oh, to be precise, sorry, 21st. This is the Toronto time, okay? It's actually
Okay.
21st, it's a Sunday, 11 p.m. Now, having said that, next week, which is the 14th of August, I want you to submit a very short analysis as your learning activity 6. Okay, it should be very straightforward. I will post the question. Make sure you check the announcement, and that
Okay.
you learning activity 6 is expected to be to submit by 11 p.m. on the 14th of August.
Okay.
Okay, you know what? I know that Winter, you need to go, right?
Yes.
Yes. I wonder if anyone has any question.
No.
Okay, so you know what?